The left is now really, they've gone at math a few times, but now they're coming back hard, saying that math is racist. John Allison, this public high school math teacher he has a master's in mathematical sciences, he's written a number of op-eds for us, and his most recent one kind of tackled this issue. And I just wanted to read a few quotes from it. So Allison was saying, "That's right. The idea that a problem can have one right answer or that students should show their work so that teachers can see how they arrived at that answer is rooted in white supremacy culture." That's what the left is saying now. But the saddest part of this whole idea isn't even that people will be learning the wrong answers can be right answers. The absolutely most abhorrent part of this insanity is that these woke education policymakers are so racist, they believe people of color are incompetent and cannot learn math. So basically what he said there, that's kind of the narrative that's going around, that if there's only one right answer, if 2 + 2 must equal 4 and it's not 5, then that's an example of racism. And what this is really, it's equity at work. It's another example of that. Black students tend to perform a little worse than other students, and there's a number of reasons for that. A lot of black students tend to be stuck in underperforming worse schools because of the lack of school choice. There was some polling from the National Center for Education Statistics where they kind of looked at how different racial groups approached, how different parents approached helping their kids with schoolwork. And while 68% of Asian parents reported that their students did homework 5 days a week, only 44% of white parents said the same, only 30% of black parents said the same. So there's some cultural differences that are exacerbating this. It's a number of reasons, but to boil it down to racism is pretty ridiculous. And, one approach we could have to this is getting into those communities, is teaching good values, is teaching that education is important and saying, hey, that we should value that more. But instead, you have a group of mostly white liberals that are trying to basically keep these black communities exactly where they are, if they are underperforming, and not really allow them to succeed. And this doesn't stop at math. American progressives who are mostly white have been doing this for decades, this sort of counterproductive enforcing this culture. And I wanted to pull up this clip from Thomas Sowell where he basically explains this phenomenon, where basically you just have a system where white liberals are telling black communities, nothing is ever your fault, you never need to be better, just keep doing what culture you're doing and we're going to accept that. So here's that clip from Thomas Sowell.
These would be blacks who came out of the Southern culture and who carried that culture with them north into the urban ghettos and into the ghettos of the South, for that matter, and who have not moved out of that culture since. Over the years, both blacks and whites have moved away from that culture. But in the poorest and worst of the ghetto areas, there are lots of people who have not. And these kinds it's a culture which didn't do whites any good, and it's certainly not doing blacks any good today. And the tragedy is that people regard this culture as somehow the authentic black culture, and therefore you're not to interfere with it.
Here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes, because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time, this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
So that's pretty eye-opening to me. It almost seems like this group of white liberals that's saying, no, this is your culture, you need to stick with this, that any criticizing of certain black cultures, anytime someone says that maybe, okay, we can approach this with more responsibility, we can focus more on education, anytime you suggest that the black community needs to change anything, by black community I mean these particular black subcultures, these white liberals call you racist, and then they insist that this old white culture be pushed upon the newer black community. So it's almost like a form of colonization, which liberals would hate. And I was just wondering, guys, do you think that this is, in any part, do you think that this is a conscious decision that like white liberals are making, that they're forcing this counterproductive white culture onto black communities, or do you think that it's more out of ignorance?
That's a tough question. I think, and part of this is, you know, I know that we would like to kind of give folks across the aisle the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
With this, I have a hard time giving them the benefit of the doubt, because it's the same thing that we've seen with the welfare state for the last, you know, 6 or 7 decades. It's essentially the idea that we're going to continue to exacerbate these financial programs in the black community that have kept the black community and members of the black working class actually under the poverty threshold, because, you know, if you go above a certain number of hours, you will no longer receive whatever support you are receiving from the government. And you certainly, there's no question about it that, you know, certain jobs, if you go above that threshold of hours, if you go above that salary threshold, you're still not making enough to make ends meet for your family, but you now no longer qualify for certain government aid.
Right.
And so the left... And the left has been addressed, or this has been addressed to the left on so many different occasions by conservative thinkers, folks like Mr. Soul, who have said, you know, these financial incentives need to be restructured in a way where they actually incentivize, you know, folks who are going to work and who are, you know, going in and changing, you know, they are, I guess, engaging with that kind of bootstrap mentality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are incentivizing, you know, poor cultural decisions and poor family decisions and poor work decisions. It's something that the left has been engaging with for decades, and I have a hard time believing that it is completely unmalicious, that they're just continuing to keep the black community in these structures and saying, you know, we're your only arm up, is this left-wing social justice culture.